All right, what's going on, fam? Merry belated Christmas, belated happy holidays to you and yours. The Boston Celtics have wrapped up a West Coast road trip 3-1, culminating in a big Christmas Day victory against the Lakers. Myself, Adam Taylor, we're here. Let's break it down on Green with Envy. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, it's your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? Once again, merry belated Christmas, happy holidays to you and yours. Joining me today from across the pond, it's my podcasting cousin, the leader of the Taylor gang, the head writer for Celtics blog, Adam Taylor. Adam, how was your holidays?
Yeah, it was good, man. Good. Ate too much. Don't really drink, so I didn't drink, but ate too much, slept a lot. Watched some basketball, man. I'm ready to talk some C's, baby. How about you?
Hell yeah, man. What was the best thing you ate? Let's start there.
I went to my Filipino friend's house. He had some like steak kind of dish. I don't know how you pronounce it or what it was, but it was delicious.
Love that. Love that, man. I'm out here in El Paso, Texas with my fiance's family. Man, we ate, it feels like everything. We had some amazing ham. We had brisket. We had mac and cheese. We had tamales. You name it. We probably had a little bit of salad. Got to mix in some greens, right? A little bit of salad, but emphasis on little bit. But we were eating good out here. And, Celtics, they were out on the West Coast, Adam, 3-1 on this road trip here out West. And, actually, you know what? It's our time. We're just getting back together here after the holidays. I want to play this right now because usually we do this with the 3-man week, but with me and you, I feel like there's so much that we got to cover from this West Coast trip. Can we go ahead and pass the rock today?
Yeah, let's do it, baby. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
You guys ready?
What's the plan, Bobby?
We're winging it, Jerry.
Yeah! I got the rock now! I got this motherfucker now! What?
All right, Adam, love that clip. You got to have a little Mark Wahlberg in here. Spring spruces up the holidays just a little bit more. But let's set the table here, and then we'll dig in and we'll go back and forth because there's a lot to hit here. Celtics West Coast trip, 3-1. Start off shaky, right? With a loss to the Warriors in overtime, reminiscent, and you've been big on this in your takeaways, in some of the things that you've posted on Twitter of talking about, remember that trip last year in which right around the same time, Celtics had a December trip out west. They went 2-2, really felt like 1-3 if you go back to that Lakers game from a year ago that Tatum kind of saved in overtime and then led to 3 straight losses against the Magic and Pacers that sent everybody crazy after a really, really hot start. Complete opposite this year. After that loss to the Warriors, 3 straight dominant victories against 3 playoff teams in the Kings, Clippers, and of course the Lakers on Christmas Day. Adam, let's start here. What's the most impressive win or part of this trip for you from Celtics perspective?
Yeah, I think the most impressive one's got to be the Kings, right? You're bouncing back off that Warriors game. No Jayson Tatum. The Kings pushed the pace. No Horford. Kings pushed the pace a bunch. The Aaron Fox is arguably the fastest player in the league. You're on the second night of a back-to-back with some tired legs, the travel, the time difference. That Kings game, to me, really kind of set the tone for the 2 games in LA. So that was the most impressive from the pressure that's on your shoulders type of standpoint. And then, as you said, with everything that went down last season, with the way that things kind of fell apart after losing to Golden State last year, that's obviously fresh in people's minds. It's fresh in the players' minds. They don't want to let that happen again. And we end up back here where they just absolutely destroy the Kings. They destroyed everybody, to be fair, apart from the Warriors, which was their own fault.
Right. And then that was, it's going to be one of those, that's just one of those matchups that's going to set Celtics fans off a little bit. And of course, when you look at the history, when you look at the NBA finals from, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago at this point, like that's going to be a triggering game, especially where the Warriors have been in a place of kind of figuring themselves out. And they've seems like they've kind of turned a corner a little bit here with Draymond out on this suspension, having to lean into some of those young guys that they just drafted recently. And so the Warriors are still going to be a tough team. And Steph Curry, let's remember this. Steph Curry had to shoot a a 3-pointer that I think was still up. It's still, I don't even know if it's come down yet. He shot that ball so high to end that game. I think it's up, FAA regulations, had to get a chart mandated on it. Like, Steph Curry had to go be really, really special to bring that game home. So you can have your complaints about it, but I think the difference in the team this year versus last year is the response was completely different than what we saw a year ago, right? And this team obviously has made some changes that we're going to talk about. And I think some of it actually starts with Joe Mazzulla, right? Joe Mazzulla, just in his response, his coaching tactics, his responses to the media and the way that he's approaching this season, I think that's actually having a pretty impactful effect on this team. And for them to come out and drop, I think, 144 on the Kings, who, of course, are not a great defense, but still 144 against anybody in this league is super impressive. And then 145 against the Los Angeles Clippers, who everyone's talking about have turned a corner. Of course, no Kawhi Leonard, but also no Kristaps Porzingis in this game. Not the same level, but still two major core pieces not in that game. And yet the Celtics were able to put up 145 and then come out on Christmas Day against the Lakers team that, LeBron and AD are always going to be geared up for a Christmas Day game. And the Celtics, despite losing a little bit of an early lead, felt like they were in control of that game from front to back. And let's just be real, it wasn't their best game from Jayson Tatum, from Jaylen Brown, but yet that just goes to the depth of this team because Derrick White, Jrue Holiday, and Kristaps Porzingis were freaking awesome in that game.
Yeah, I mean, that Clippers game, to me, was a statement win. I know Joe Mazzulla said it wasn't a statement win. I tweeted out just after the game saying, I don't care what Joe says, this was a statement win. He clearly knows more than I do, but I'm allowed to get a little bit more high and a little bit more low because I'm not trying to lead the team. I wrote it in the takeaways as well. Like, this is, yeah, okay, there's no Kawhi, but if Kawhi's there, he needs to impact the game with, like, what, a 35-point swing? Mm-hmm. Especially if Porzingis is healthy.
On both the defensive and offensive side,
exactly.
Right?
So I was like, yeah, there's no Kawhi, but how much of a difference does he necessarily make if Porzingis is healthy? If we're going in both teams fully fit. So I see this as a statement game. You walk into a contending team's house on their floor, and you disrespect them like that. You bully them. And this is a team like, yeah, okay, there's no Kawhi. There's still 3 future Hall of Famers on that roster.
Yeah.
You still dealt with James Harden, Paul George. You dealt with Russell Westbrook. One of the things I really want to touch on in a bit is dealing with size. The last 2 games, Boston have dealt with Ivica Zubac and then Anthony Davis, and they've won both of them. Coming into the season, everyone's like, how is the Celtics going to deal with size? Porzingis is too slight. He's going to get bullied. Horford's going to be too old. What are they going to do? They're dealing with it. They've dealt with LeBron now. They dealt with his size and strength. They've dealt with Davis. They've dealt with Zubac. I'm not concerned about that anymore at this point. We'll get on to Neemy as well. But yeah, to me, like walking into that Clippers, walking onto the floor against the Clippers, handling business. You've handled business against the Kings, then you go and handle business against the Lakers. Those are some tough places to play. Playing LA twice, and then the Lakers on Christmas Day and winning. That shit don't come easy, man. I'm feeling really good about this team at the moment.
And just on that, on that point of dealing with size, I think something that you mentioned, the Porzingis and Horford aspect, I think the parts that have kind of changed that equation for the Celtics are Jayson Tatum and Jrue Holiday. We talked last year a lot about Marcus Smart being, a big ball one. Jrue Holiday has slid right into that role, and you can make the argument that he even excels even more at that role because he can kind of fluctuate between a few different roles. He's the captain of this defense. You've heard some of the Joe Mazzulla clips talking about, Jrue, it's you have freedom within this defense to make calls. He is the defensive coordinator, the defensive play caller, on that side of the ball. And then there's Jayson Tatum. And I think you look at that Lakers game specifically, in which I'm pulling up the stats here, he guarded Anthony Davis, who had a great game. Obviously, Anthony Davis had a phenomenal day, but it didn't do it against Jayson Tatum. Jayson Tatum guarded him for almost 5 minutes in that game and only had 4 of his 38 points against Jayson Tatum. So directly one-on-one, Tatum was stepping up and taking a lot of that responsibility. So now when you look at the Celtics and you think about how are they going to handle size? How are they going to match up with some of these teams that have the Anthony Davises, the Zubaches, the, Giannis's, and we've seen, Holiday guarding guys like Embiid. Like, it's all 4 of those guys that you have to think about. And that hasn't even gotten to the point of the best shot blocker on the team is a 6'3" shooting guard in Derrick White, right? Like, so that, it's no matter where you're coming at this from, the Celtics have built themselves. And I think we probably fooled ourselves into this team having more versatility than we thought last year. Whereas now I think this team, that's one of probably their biggest strengths, is other than health, is that their top end talent is extremely versatile with that top six and how they can guard in the perimeter, how they can guard the basket. And then on the opposite end, all the different options that they have, from shooting the 3-point ball, going into the nail, going into the post, everyone being able to shoot. This is true versatility that we're seeing from the Celtics this season.
A lot of it for me starts with guarding small, right? So when I say guarding small, what I mean is putting Jrue on an Anthony Davis, putting Derrick White on a LeBron. Because as we spoke about at length, that removes the advantage when a switch occurs on the screen, because now you're matching up the way the matchups are supposed to be. But what I also like is the way that, especially Jrue, he kind of, when you hear about boxers and boxers are being told to sit into their punches, really bang your weight and kind of drop your hip into that punch. Jrue does that on defense. He sits into his heels a lot when he's guarding these bigger guys, gets that low center of gravity, widens his base, and it gets hard for them to back him down. You see it all the time. He seems to be hanging with these big, strong dudes, and you're like, how is he doing it? He's really sitting into it, but not directly on his heels, because obviously he's still able to slide his feet. That, to me, has created so much versatility elsewhere, because you can switch. You can trust Jrue to kind of deal with it. If somebody faces up on him, when bigs are kind of drop stepping on him, he's staying in front of them. When they're facing up, he's swiping down at the ball, he's getting some steals, he's speeding guys up. To me, all the versatility starts there.
Yeah.
And then everything else around it kind of just evolves. And if Jrue's getting bullied or things aren't working out, maybe it's not his night, maybe he's a bit banged up or whatever, you can switch White into that action. And if it's not working there, okay, so we'll scram them out, and now we're going to match up size for size. And there's very few teams, and this was noticeable against the Lakers, it's very few teams that match Boston size for size. Boston are quite a big team. They're quite long, they're lengthy, they're rangy. Orlando matched them up, but obviously we've spoke about Orlando. We know what problems they pose. The Lakers also pose some problems size-wise, but Boston just had answers. They're used to that now. I think the Magic games earlier in the season taught them some valuable lessons that they put into action against Los Angeles.
So let's stay here with the Jrue Holiday conversation, because number one, he had, well, I'll just be real, he had a stinker against the Warriors to start this trip, and then bounced back with 3 excellent games, including his first 2 20-point games as a Celtic. And so you look at Jrue Holiday and everything that you just talked about with what he brings defensively, and now where he's at shooting the ball around 42% from the 3-point line on the season. And you combine that with the All-Star campaign that is building momentum day by day for Derrick White. So I'd like to say that I don't know if we started that, but I know we're at the forefront of that bandwagon. So I know Derrick White is building that All-Star campaign with each passing game. And I'm going to make a statement here, Adam, and I want you to react. With no caveat, Jrue Holiday and Derrick White are the best backcourt in the NBA. Full stop.
I don't think there's a question there. That statement is factual.
I think it is too. And I think, early in the season, it was easy to say, oh, it's the best defensive backcourt. And you would just kind of leave it at that, right? And I think right now, with the evolution of Derrick White that we're seeing this season, Jrue Holiday, who's now shooting the ball better than he was. And I think this is a huge development for the Celtics, is that for me, it felt like early on in the season, now that we're about 30-ish games in almost, Jrue Holiday's finding himself within the offense in better positions. I think that was something that had to be felt out through these, first quarter plus games or so. And, now when you look at what they can do on both sides of the ball, I think it's really hard to look through the NBA and make a case that they're not the best backcourt. It's not Steph and Clay anymore, right? Clay's not at that same level, even though they had a throwback game. John Morant just came back, him and Desmond Bane. That TBD. Let's circle back on that. Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, maybe you can make an argument, but I'm running.
They've both been hurt this year, though, right? Like Mitchell missed a bunch, Garland's now out. Like, you look at Stephen Clay. Clay hasn't, as you said, Clay's kind of, there was a case a few weeks back to sit Clay, to bring him off the bench.
Exactly.
And he's getting back, so TBD, Clay is performing a bit better and his numbers are going up. So you could have an argument for Clay maybe in a month's time from now. Jar and Bane, I just don't think they give you enough defensively to be in that same bracket. I think at least,
and that's kind of the Mitchell Garland issue, even when healthy as well, too, right?
Yeah, and like a lot of people are going to be like, no, these guys are putting up more impact offensively than what White and Jrue are defensively. But the fact of the matter is, Jrue and White can both go for 20 on any night. They went for 18 apiece against the Lakers. Do you know what I mean? These guys, like Jrue, can be a second or third option on a championship team. We know this because he was.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
That's it.
And that's what's impressive about Holiday is that he's had to recalibrate his role in the offense, right? Because he was at a lot of times, especially over the last 2 years when Middleton was out, he had to be the number 2 from a scoring perspective to Giannis. And that's not his natural disposition, is to be that guy. And so I think, you know, while he's had to take kind of a step back and reassess, he's finding that particular spot. And then Derrick White, you mentioned before, right? He can go for 20. Either of these guys could go for 20. Jrue Holiday just had his first couple 20-point games, like I mentioned. But here's Derrick White. So let's you know, we're going to hammer home this All-Star campaign a little bit more here. In the month of December, 11 games. And this is actually a point kind of towards the overall success of the Celtics team. They've had a pretty tough December when it comes to their schedule. They're 9-2 at 11 games in December. Here's the opponents: the Sixers, the Pacers, the Knicks, the Cavs twice, the Magic twice, and then a West Coast road trip against Golden State, Sacramento, LA Clippers, LA Lakers. All of those teams right there in that 11-game span, all of them are in the play-in or better. And some of them you can even argue are underachieving. In that time frame, you know, Derrick White is actually averaging 20 points per game. He's averaging 1.5 steals. He's averaging nearly 2 blocks a game, 4 rebounds, 5.5 assists, all while shooting 45% from the 3-point line, 52% field goals, 93. So 52, 45, 93.5 from the free throw line. On the season, he's just shy of that 40, 50, 90 mark. Like, it's really incredible what he's doing. And then when you couple that with Jrue Holiday being a 42% 3-point shooter and everything he brings on defense, you know, the statement of them being the best backcourt in the NBA, as of right now, I think there's no way to counteract that with an argument for somebody else.
Not a legitimate argument. There's always a way to counteract it with an argument. It's just never legitimate. I don't see what backcourt's better. I also think that both guys are playing lesser roles than what they're capable of. I think that, you know, when you're watching Derrick White play, he kind of steps into certain areas of the game what I needed at the time. He's very versatile that way. There's not a better backcourt than these two guys. And you could argue the same for wing duos. You could argue the same for big man rotations. Yeah. Like, it's all over the floor. The only thing that really worries you then is like 10th to 12th man. I mean, the biggest argument after the Clippers game.
That's by the way, it's a pretty good worry to have if that's the first thing that you're really worried about, is that 10th to 12th spot, which is rarely going to make a difference when you get to the playoffs.
You know how good this team is when the biggest discussion going on online is whether Neemy is better than Kornet. Like, dude, we're arguing about third string bigs because everything else is so swimming. Like, we're good.
It's hard to sit here and just come in and be like, hey man, I feel great again about this team. How about you, Adam? Same. You know, like, we could do that for each of our podcasts, but that's not going to be interesting because we're having to figure out, you know, where it is that we can find spots. And, you know, maybe this is a good time. Let's talk a little bit about Neemy, because I do think, you know, when I look at that Lakers game from Christmas Day, which is yesterday as we're recording, Joe Mazzulla coached that game like it was a playoff game. Like, I feel like he left the starters were rolling to start that game. He left them in about a beat or two longer than he typically does when he comes in with Horford and Hauser for Tatum and Holiday. He let that go a beat longer because of the way that the starters, you know, got out to such a great start against that Lakers team and gave themselves a little bit of breathing room. And so, you know, to see that, you know, Luke Kornet, who was available yesterday, and Keita got the call above Kornet, you know, he only played 6 minutes. One thing, like I said, Mazzulla kind of coached this like a true playoff game, where whether it's Keita, whether it's Kornet, if you look at them in a playoff game, and probably this is game 4 or before, when you get to game 5, game 6, game 7, they may not see the floor at all. But in the first couple games of a playoff series, they're probably only going to get 5-6 minutes, maybe even a little bit less. And so, you know, Neemy got, I think it was 6 minutes and 43 seconds in this game. What were your thoughts on him in that type of limited role, which really kind of gives a vision as to if he's going to play in a playoff scenario, this might be the type of runway that he gets?
The first thing that got to me was maybe Kornet's not playing for a conditioning reason, and that's not because I think Kornet's better. I just expected to at least kind of get a feel for where Kornet's at. Now we've seen Neemy for a few games, put Kornet in, see what the difference is in how the offense looks compared to the two. Just have a bit more data to do now that we've seen Neemy play. What I really liked was, I'm going to run this clip now because I really want to point out the pass and what that could mean moving forward.
Oh, this is one of my favorite plays. I think I know where you're going with this.
So as everybody can see, they run the chin action. Jrue Holiday cuts. D'Angelo Russell, pinches in, goes to tag Holiday's cut. Sorry, I didn't realize I could talk while the clip was playing, so it threw me. Let me run it again now. So D'Angelo Russell kind of slides over.
Yeah, run it back one more time.
Run it back. So look, they go to a chin action, kind of. Yeah, they do. Jrue Holiday cuts. D'Angelo Russell sags in to tag the cut/roll. Neemy just fires it out to Pritchard on the weak side corner for a catch and shoot. But it was the pass that really stood out to me. Celtics run a bunch of chin actions, bunch of variations out of chin actions all through the game. If you want to see more on them, I broke down every single one of those variations on today's takeaways. But what stood out to me here was Jrue Holiday runs it. You can see that Russell kind of slides over, you can't really class it as a roll, it's a cut, but he slides over to tag, get there to try at least have a hand in the way if that pass is made to Holiday on that run. It doesn't happen. Neemy spots that pass to Pritchard, kicks it out, boom, it's just catch and shoot. That's what stood out to me was, one, Neemy didn't go with the first passing option, which would have been Jrue. Two, he saw the second passing option, which is progress for any big, and he made that pass, which was 2 passes away. You could have gone to Tatum. Pritchard was next over, 2 passes away, a skip pass. Nice. You've gone from Rob Williams, who, in my opinion, has the potential to be one of the better passing bigs in the league when healthy. And you kind of start putting Neemy into these positions, 7-foot rim runner, very impactful in terms of just energy and size. If he can learn to pass as well as be a handoff hub, that's a huge wrinkle that, to me, puts him over Luke Kornet. But again, he's super raw defensively, doesn't really have much of a post package in terms of scoring. Most of his rebounds comes off his own misses, goes to that guy. It was like 3 attempts to get a bucket. So he's got other things to work on before we even start discussing that passing being something to evolve. But it's just nice to see that wrinkle there in the first place. So that really stood out to me. And then obviously, he got that foul on AD early after checking into the game, kind of bodied him a little bit. I'm fine with that. First thing that went through my head, let him pick up 6 fouls, let him pick up 5 fouls. He can just be in there to rough guys up, pick up fouls, and develop slowly.
Yeah, I was pumped when I was reading your takeaways this morning, and I saw that pass was in there, because that pass woke me up out of my food coma, right? Got me out of my chair watching Neemy make that pass, because it felt like it feels like, because we're watching the development of him in real time, and we're assessing him as how does he fit when he's playing with real guys. Not, it's really hard to make an assessment of people when they're playing, of players when they're in garbage time, but this is real minutes against real teams that matter. And for him to make that pass, to make it as the second or third read, whatever it may be, to find Pritchard in the corner, that was really exciting. For me, it was that play. And then the LeBron was in transition. Neemy runs back, and basically, LeBron has to try to deal with Neemy, ends up getting a travel call, creates a turnover against LeBron. He wasn't perfect in his, like I said, it's a small sample size, 6.5 minutes in this game, but I think that's realistic for if he's going to be a guy that you can play sometimes in the postseason. That's probably going to be about what he's going to get, if everybody's healthy. And, for me, those 2 plays stood out. Wasn't perfect. There's a few times where he maybe got lost in different rotations and trying to scramble on the back end, but that's okay. It's all building and learning and growing. And so to see those 2 plays, I thought that was tremendous for me, just for the expectations, right? Relative to the expectations that we have for a guy who's our 3rd/4th big, 9th, 10th, 11th guy in the rotation. I thought it was super encouraging watching that. And then also shout out to Payton Pritchard, who got smoking hot in that second quarter, and in a quarter when the Celtics were kind of, the one quarter in which they almost lost a little bit of grasp of the game, and the Lakers made a run. Payton Pritchard has also been turning a corner here as far as, making sure that he's a stable in that rotation. Had a great 10-point consecutive run for him that I think was really important to see those 2 guys from the bench be able to step up and make some impacts.
I called it Pritchin in because he was pitching in. Did you get it?
I like it. I like that. I thought it was good.
Yeah, no one else commented on it, and I was quite sad. I thought that was going to be like a topic of conversation. It just didn't work out that way. Dad jokes for the win, man. Now, I liked Pritchard. Look, it was all second quarter scoring. He missed the rest of his shots throughout the game, but he brought pace. He brought off-ball movement. He brought some inverted screening. There's more to it. There's more to what he brings to the floor than just scoring. Obviously, if his threes aren't falling, it does tend to affect the pace that he plays with, the the sharpness that he kind of cuts with and screens with, it does seem to have a bit of an effect on him. But overall, like, he's been great for the past 6 weeks, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I just have here, like, so using just this month, right? So the last 11 games, same ones that I listed off earlier when talking about Derrick White. You know, he's been 48% from the 3-point line on about 5 attempts over the last 11 games. So the entire month of December, 48%. He's back up to 40%. I know at the beginning of the year, we were all stressing a little bit, like, yo, where's preseason P? You know, Pacific P, as Jrue Carter was calling him throughout.
Or Crypto P, which seems to be the one that's stuck. There's too many, man.
Hey, listen, our guy Jrue, he's just rifling him off here, man. He's got him locked and loaded, and he's got all the Pritchard commentary for us here. But Pritchard's been really good, because we've talked a lot about, even when he was struggling, he was bringing other things, right? He was kind of playing a TJ McConnell impression when his shot wasn't going down, right? Whether it was getting steals or, you know, getting some timely offensive rebounds. He was doing a lot of the little things. Now, for Payton Pritchard to be at his most effective, he's got to be that knockdown shooter, and that's what he's been in the month of December. And I think that's really big, as, you know, you talked about the two conversations that really have become prevalent as we get about a month and a half away from the trade deadline are, do the Celtics need to get another big, a third big behind Horford and Porzingis? And then is Pritchard the third guard, right? The third guard in the rotation. And when he's playing like he's playing over the last, you know, 11 games or so, like, I mean, I'm fine with it, right? I don't see a huge need to go and upgrade that. Of course, if there's something that, you know, makes sense and you can't pass up, then you look into it. But I don't think it's a major pressing need the way that Payton Pritchard's playing right now.
No, you keep Pritchard, excuse me, you convert Neemy to a full-time deal, you call it a day, and you move on.
Yeah,
like
I think right now that's the path. I do.
Yeah, I mean, do your due diligence, see what's out there. If nobody's better or gives you the upside of Neemy, and like without the huge contract hit, just convert him. He's earned it. I do think he's earned it. I'm not sure whether I'd consistently go to him over Kornet. I think there's certain matchups that would make more sense.
I think it's matchup dependent by the time you get to them, or, you know, obviously if Horford or Porzingis is out, and even then it's matchup dependent on who gets the bulk of whatever minutes are available. But I guess we should address, because it was a rumor that came out. I don't know if it was Christmas Day or the day before Christmas, maybe Christmas.
It was Eve. Christmas Day. It
was on Christmas Day, right? And I apologize, I can't remember who reported it, but, you know, Celtics with interest in Kelly Olynyk. Right. And I, you know, you and I were chatting about what we can talk about today and brought this up. It's like, man, I feel like we've just talked about this topic for so long, but here's the reality. Kelly Olynyk, it's a fun dream scenario to add Kelly Olynyk as a third big. We all liked Kelly when he was a Celtic. Think it would be great, you know, with his shooting, his size, he would fit with this team very nicely. I think it'd be a great addition. But here's the thing. If you're going to get Kelly Olynyk, who's on an expiring deal, he's at $12 million. So either you're putting Horford in the deal, which isn't happening. That's just not going to be a thing. Not when you're dealing with Giannis, not when you're dealing with Embiid, not with Bam, not with Jokic, not with AD. Like, you're going to have Horford. You're going to need Horford. So that's out of the equation. And then it gets back to who we were just talking about a minute ago. Do you want to put Payton Pritchard in this? Because you're going to have to if you're going to try and match that salary. And then you're going to have to take 3 out of probably the Kornet, Banton, Brissett, Stevens, Svi grouping, 3 of them to get to that 12 million. And then there's a whole bunch of cap gymnastics that we got to go tag Keith Smith in to tell us about what the Jazz would even need to do to make that happen. You have to add a 2nd-round pick to make that happen. It's honestly, it's going to be too much. And I don't think it's worth it. So Kelly Olynyk, fun dream scenario to talk about what that looks like. I just don't see a world in which it's realistic.
Unless it gets waived.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a trade in a way, but also, like, he's valuable enough. The Jazz will find somebody to give them something for him.
Yeah,
like,
I'm just saying the only way it can be realistic, really, is with a trade if he gets waived. I really, really, really like Olynk in terms of his fit for this team. Another floor space and big man, can screen, can rebound. It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
like,
it's too tough.
You can never say never. Not with Brad Stevens and the way this team is. Knowing Brad, it's going to be a 5-team deal. There's going to be a million players moved, and you pick him up for like a 2nd-round pick and a box of cookies. Like, that's just the way that Brad's operated. We spoke about it the other week, right? What the roster looked like when he took over, and who you've lost over those 2 seasons to where we are now. It kind of looks like he's just fleeced everybody. But in general, just from like, if everything's in a vacuum and everything's black and white, then no, you're not picking up Kelly Olynyk in any trade that ultimately makes you better across the board. You don't add Pritchard and go get a big, because now you need to find someone for Pritchard, and you've just used assets to go and get the big. So how now do you find assets to go and get the guard, unless you're like, hey, John Wall can do this for us consistently, which, newsflash, you probably can't.
Yeah.
Then you're going to be in a tough position.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more and more we look at this team, unless there's some type of perfect deal out here, and Brad Stevens seems like he's definitely going to do his due diligence, and he'll be waiting around come trade deadline week, trade deadline day, that, hey, if we can go, spring a second rounder for somebody that makes sense that we weren't expecting, he'll go do it. But at the same time, I think this team, the way it's presently constituted and keeping your assets, it's the move. I do think that's where I'm leaning towards as being the best move is probably no move at all, unless the perfect scenario arises. And, we'll have to see. We got about a month and a half or so until we hit that trade deadline. But Adam, another point that I wanted to pivot to here is, on Christmas Day, I mentioned this at the beginning, talking about that win against the Lakers. Best three players the Celtics had the other day, probably KP in the backcourt. KP, Derrick White, and Jrue.
Undoubtedly. It's not even a maybe. That's a definite.
And that's the scary part, right? Because I want to talk a little bit about Jayson Tatum, who we talked about his defense on Anthony Davis, taking that responsibility, guarding him for about 5 minutes of time or so, and keeping him to just 4 points on 4 shots during his time guarding him directly one-on-one. Jayson Tatum, 25, 8, and 7. And that's now a floor game for Jayson Tatum. Like, this is kind of the PSA that I wanted to put out there. It's really scary when you think about the Celtics being currently first place in the Eastern Conference, 22-6. And Tatum has, as good as Tatum's been, he's going to be an all-star. He's probably at about a second team all-NBA level, I'd say, about right now. And he hasn't really hit that stretch that we typically see from him, throughout the course of the year, where you're like, oh, shit. This is the Jayson Tatum moment. This is the Tatum that is first team all NBA. That is a MVP, contender. And last year, so I just went and look back at last year for Jayson Tatum, right? And so last year he had 6 stretches of 3 or more games in a row with 30 plus points. So 6 or more stretches. Some of those were 6-game stretches. Some of those were 4-game stretches, but he had multiple stretches where, everyone around the league was like, damn, he's him, right? That's what everyone likes to say. They say, I am him. He is him. They were saying that about Jayson Tatum. Only one stretch of that so far this season. But as he's talked about, he's sacrificed. Everyone on this team is sacrificed because he hasn't needed to do that. Because like we just said, he was 25, 8, and 7.
And that's a quiet game. That's a quiet
game. And that is scary for the rest of the league.
Doc Rivers made me laugh during the during the ABC broadcast, when he was like, he's adopted some Magic Johnson to his game. Doc's out there trying his best to talk his way.
I didn't have the volume on, so tell me more about this.
Yeah, so they were talking about, like, Tatum's making the assists, he's making the reads, even like the secondary assist that he was making, like the pass to lead on to the pass, or the screen to create the pass. Not even the screen to create the assist, the screen to create the pass before the assist. Just like the way he was reading and orchestrating everything as an off-ball guy. And he was doing that because he knew that Porzingis had it going, because White and Holiday had it going, because he wanted to make sure Brown was getting to his spots. Tatum was doing a lot more off-ball, a lot more movement stuff. And Doc Rivers is like, yeah, you can see some Magic Johnson in his game. I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm like, come on, let's not go there.
That's probably the first Tatum Magic comparison that I've heard. I'm not mad at it, but I think it's the first one that I've heard.
Yeah, it's probably the only one, right? It's just different type of players completely. And that Doc, like, if you weren't listening to it, go back and listen, because it felt like Doc was trying to talk himself into a role with the Celtics somehow. It's just like, I love this team, everything they do, there's no weakness. When I was coaching them, there was this, now there's this. I'm like, okay. But from a standpoint of, okay, maybe the Magic comparison was a little bit egregious, a little bit off base, but there was a world where I could see it at the same time. You know what I mean? Tatum's making things happen without the ball in his hands now, and that's like an evolution that was vastly needed for this team to work. Not just for Tatum to do that, but for everybody to buy into being that off-ball kind of facilitator, that connector. But also because Tatum's been so ball dominant for his entire career. Now, all of a sudden, he's just as impactful off ball as what he is on ball. That's huge, man. Such a huge development.
And I pointed this out on Twitter at the beginning of the game, right? Celtics go on that electric 12-0 run to start the game. Craziest part about that for me, I don't think Tatum touched the ball once in that entire span. Like, never mind, didn't shoot the ball once. He didn't touch the ball once because that's how crazy the depth is. And that's not to say that he didn't do anything, right? And that's kind of the point, I think. That
it's exactly,
is that, his spacing, his, whether it was him cutting, whether it's him, manning up and guarding Anthony Davis, that you can have Kristaps who, can sag all the way off Jared Vanderbilt and play in the lane and disrupt shots. You have Jrue Holiday guarding LeBron James. Like, there's so many things that Tatum has opened up that are outside of just him having these massive scoring performances, because they're not needed night to night. Doesn't mean he can't do it. And I think we're going to see this. So this is the other part that I wanted to make, or a point that I wanted to make, is that I think we're going to see at one point a stretch or two where he's just so good that you're going to see 4 or 5 30-point games in a row from him. And I don't think his MVP chances are quite dead yet. I beginning of the season, I was very big on this being the MVP season for Jayson Tatum. With the sacrifice that they're making as a team, it doesn't quite seem as likely for that to be the case. But I do think that there's a couple really hot Tatum stretches away, and the continuing success of this team, that it's not out of the realm of possibility. Now, there's some really special seasons from individuals happening around the league that are going to make it difficult, that are shouldering, I don't want to say more responsibility, just more. Yeah, right. Like, they just have to do more because they don't have the luxuries that Jayson Tatum plays with the Celtics. And so that might make it a little bit difficult. But I think if the Celtics keep on this pace, if Tatum has, a couple 4, 5, 6 game stretches where he's going for 30 to 40 points every single night with, rebounds. Now he's 8 to 10 rebounds every night. Just bank on it, bet it, he's getting that for you. And now he's getting, 5, 6 assists a night. So, when he has those stretches and the Celtics continue to win, I don't think his MVP chances are dead quite yet. So PSA to the rest of the league, be scared. Be very scared of Jayson Tatum.
I just want to add to that and just say, like, look, I know last year he kind of heated up before the All-Star game and then had a bit of a quieter down bit. But historically, like, the trend has majoritarily been he really heats up after the All-Star break.
Yeah. It's that January, February area where he really minus last year, which was I think was a big part of that hot 21-4, 21-5 start they had last year.
Yeah, and it was also like the knock-on effect of this West Coast road trip last season. It was part of it. It wasn't just Tatum that didn't have his usual kind of surge. Everybody didn't have that surge that wherever they usually have it. Right, Browns is usually a little bit later, a bit closer to the postseason. Tatum usually gets hot in that February and then just slowly starts ramping up. Like, so we're only in December. I know we're at the end of December, but the All-Star games in February. There's time yet for Tatum to really start ramping up, but it's going to be interesting to see how he does that without sacrificing the fluidity, the connectedness of everybody else around him, and not becoming. At the minute, they're very egalitarian, right? You don't want it to become heliocentric around Tatum, because then all the good stuff that's got them to where they are would start to kind of fall apart.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, this has been going around Twitter the last couple of days. The strength of schedule, I think it's the third in the league. Their strength of schedule right now. Now, strength of schedule is kind of fluid, right? Because if the Magic or Pacers don't keep up their current pace, that strength of schedule is gonna slip a bit. But third strength of schedule, and you compare that to the Bucks and Sixers, who have had much easier schedules, and you look at where this team is at. This team is special right now, and coming up, they get a little bit of a break here over the next 5 games or so. 4 of the next 5 games are going to be against teams at the bottom of their respective conferences. The Pistons, who, I like to think that the NBA is so deep, there is no easy games, but Pistons on just a massively historic losing streak, play them on Thursday. Then you get the Raptors. Then they go down to San Antonio, which, by the way, very excited. Shout out to Lorena and to Danielle, Greg's fiance, my fiance. They got us tickets to go see the Spurs and Celtics in San Antonio on Christmas Eve.
Wemby, baby.
I know. We're going to be hanging out with Wemby Christmas Eve. Shout out to the ladies of GWE. Very excited. So, Wemby, if you could.
Christmas Eve? Do you mean New Year's Eve?
New Year's Eve. There you go. Got
I was thinking then, like, dude, are you going next year? Look, had the tickets on sale already.
We went to a hot tub time machine, But, real quick, Wemby, stay away from the ball boys, man. Please don't be rolling your ankles on, in warm-ups. I got to see you live and in person on New Year's Eve. So that's going to be fun. Then the Celtics will go to Oklahoma City, which will be a tough game. But then they have the Jazz right after that at home. So 4 out of the next 5 after that brutal 11-game stretch the Celtics just got through, 9-2, by the way, which is incredible. They have a little bit of a break here. So hopefully this will continue to be just a hot streak for the Celtics that they just keep building momentum on.
I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, that's the thing. There isn't much else to say here. So we'll wrap here, but I want to ask you one quick question before we
go for it, dude. Let's do it.
Have you ever watched the TV show Scrubs?
Yeah.
Dude, so did you listen to the broadcast with Donald Faison and Whit
Dude, do you know how much it blew my fucking mind that Tuck was on there?
Dude, Turkleton is my guy. Like, but from all of high school, Scrubs is one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Also, the same Bill Lawrence, the executive producer of that show, is same executive producer of Ted Lasso, by the way. So it's got a good lineage right there. And Donald Faison being on the broadcast brought me a lot of joy. By the way, if anybody has the plug into Donald Faison, I've already DM'd him. I got to get him on the show. That's my guy right there. My goal is to get him on the show. And I saw probably about 2-3 weeks ago that he was going to be in a TV show and he was playing the role of owner of the Celtics. I was like, oh, that's weird. Had no idea it was actually based on Whit Grousbeck's life. I think it's the ex-husband of his current wife is the one that wrote it or some shit like that. But had no idea that was going to be the connection, but thoroughly enjoyed getting a little bit of Turk in my life in the booth. So anytime you want to go back in the booth, Turk, it's definitely appreciated from the Green with Envy podcast.
I don't know what else to say. I'm only joking. I said that one on purpose.
Well, let's wrap it up here. I think we're at a good spot here that we can wrap it up. Like we said, coming up later this week, we'll see what it looks like from a production standpoint, what we have available. But as always, make sure you guys join the Discord. Come follow us on YouTube. Come join us on Twitter, social media, wherever you can find us. Make sure you are plugged in with myself, with Adam, with Greg. We'll have you covered up until the new year and beyond. Adam, usually I give this to Greg, but any final thoughts you have before we send this out?
Yeah, so my buddy Sean Coleman covers the Grizzlies out in Memphis. Just came on X, Twitter, obviously. Left a comment, which is dope because they feed through to StreamYard now. The title of the episode on X/Twitter is Best Backcourt in the League. Sean's like, the Grizzlies. Unfortunately, we did discuss this earlier. I'm just not sold on the defensive upside of the Grizzlies. I'm not sold on them being better than the Jrue Holiday, Derrick White pairing. Please feel free to debate me on this. Come on the show if you want. But for right now, Grizzlies are not the best backcourt in the NBA.
Not right now. Let's circle back. We got 3 games of Ja Morant this year, who did just win Western Conference Player of the Week. To be fair, in his return back, they got a 3-game win.
It's his only week.
It's his only week. So let's circle back to that conversation in in maybe a month or two. We'll circle back on that. But I think for right now, best backcourt in the league, definitively Derrick White, Jrue Holiday. Enough said. Adam, let's wrap up this podcast, and we'll be back later in the week with more Celtics coverage.
Happy holidays.
Peace, everybody.